Everybody, welcome back to the
Hello, you
Castro
guys.
Files. How are you doing, honey?
I'm great. How are you?
Awesome.
Good.
Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight, or today, or this morning, or whenever
This
it is
evening,
for you.
You know, just thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining. First and foremost, go out, check us out on iTunes, Spotify. Give us a like, subscribe. Go out, like and subscribe to the YouTube video if you don't mind. That would be
Castro Files.
great. Set the little bell so you get the notifications.
Reminder and give us a thumbs up.
Yeah. On top of that, go out, check out Minor League Studios. We can find all of our good stuff, some shirts.
Swag.
We're going to be updating it pretty quick here.
Yes.
Making some notes or making some changes, adding some cool stuff. So
Cool.
Go check out that. All right, with that out of the way, Castro,
I've got today's story.
You've got today's story.
I
What
do.
is it?
It is called Eastern State Penitentiary, Philadelphia.
Okay.
It is the history of this penitentiary, and it comes from legendsofamerica.com.
Nice.
Just going to talk a little bit about the history, some of the things that went on there.
And when you guys see the pictures of this,
pictures.
you may recognize it. It is crazy.
Should open this before we get going.
Probably.
Just in case when I
need
get
it.
parched.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right.
All right, let's hear it. Let's go.
So, Eastern State Penitentiary, Philadelphia. Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia is well known for several reasons. It was one of the most expensive prisons ever built in the world and utilized as a radical philosophy. It housed some of America's most notorious criminals, and it is said to be most haunted prison in the country. The idea of a new type of prison system came about in 1787, just 4 years after the American Revolution was over, when important men gathered at the home of Benjamin Franklin to discuss prison reform. At the time, the Walnut Street Jail was located directly behind Independence Hall, and the conditions there were terrible. Men, women, and children who had committed all manners of crimes, from anything from petty theft to murder, were jailed together on what amounted to be a little more than dirt pens, which were overcrowded, disease-ridden, cold, dangerous, and generally unsupervised. Abuse by both jailers and fellow inmates was common, and food, heat, clothing, or protection was only provided if the inmate could afford the price.
Oh.
Rape, robbery, and beatings were common practice, and it wasn't unusual for prisoners to die from cold and starvation.
Obviously sounds like a great place to
you want to go
hang out,
vacation there? These abuses led to the formation of the Philadelphia Society for Alleviating the Ministry of Public Prisons, which met at Benjamin Franklin's house to discuss improvements and alternatives. One member, a prominent Philadelphia physician and signer of the Declaration of Independence named Benjamin Rush, called for a house of repentance rather than prisons, where the name penitentiary came from.
So the House of Repentance is
Yes.
the original
That's
way of saying penitentiary.
right.
Interesting.
Rush proclaimed that the radical change was needed and believed that crime was a moral disease. Further, he suggested that a house of repentance would be a place where prisoners could meditate on their crimes, experience spiritual remorse, and undergo rehabilitation. The plan was built around the idea of solitary confinement that would allow criminals to mediate on their crimes and involved no corporate punishments. The other men agreed, and the system, which became known as the Pennsylvania system, would be utilized at Eastern State Penitentiary and other facilities throughout the world.
It's funny you already said it. They said they weren't going to have corporal punishment.
Yes.
Just hang in there.
Yeah. The men soon convinced the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and started their work on the Walnut Street Jail. In 1790, a small penitentiary house with 16 solitary cells was built. The inmates were segregated by sex and crime. Vocational workshops were instituted to occupy the prisoners' time, and much of the abuse behavior was abolished. But the facility was still overcrowded, and the city's population increased, so did the crime. Though it would be decades before a new prison was built, the ground was broken for the Eastern State Penitentiary in a cherry orchard outside the city in 1822. Designed by British-born architect John Haviland, the penitentiary would be unlike any seen before, with 7 single-level cell block wings radiating from a central sub-hub from which one guard could see down all of the cell blocks.
So we'll have a picture here.
There's a picture,
It kind of, the way it looks, it's like a half moon kind of thing.
Yes,
and you have like
and you can see
3
straight down.
or whatever, however many lines go down, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about it earlier, and it's basically so it gives them a line of sight
without having
nothing's out
right.
of sight, everything you can see,
right?
And then the cells are off of those, which is
crazy.
It's ominous. Yeah, it's creepy.
It says Haviland was inspired by the English prisons and asylums built beginning in the 1780s and gave it a neo-Gothic look. And we do have a picture of that as well.
It's a castle.
Yeah.
It's basically a giant castle.
Yeah. The building's imposing facade was meant to be intimidating. Although its battlements and windows were fake, its interior was designed much like a church.
Huh.
Though it was 7 years before it would be completed, the penitentiary opened in 1829 with an initial capacity for 250 inmates. Each prisoner would have his own 8 by 12 foot cell, which featured central heating, a flush toilet, running water, a shower bath, a skylight, and a private exercise yard. The skylight was the only light that these prisoners were given.
While they were in...
Yes, while they're in their cell.
Okay.
From the minute the inmates entered the facility, they were kept isolated. They were escorted into the prison with an eyeless hood as placed over their heads.
This is weird.
Afterward, the isolation continued so that they could contemplate their crimes and read the Bible, which led to the penitence and reformation. And the Bible was the only book that they could read.
No Harry Potter.
Right, and they also weren't allowed letters from friends and family.
No Lord of the Rings back then.
No love notes, no nothing. To accomplish this goal, the inmates could not mingle with other prisoners or continue relations with friends and family. When they were outside their cells, they were required to wear masks to hide their faces in the their private exercise yards, which they were allowed to use 1 hour per day with minimized interactions with the guards. During their time in their cells, they worked on prison projects such as shoemaking or weaving. Their only contact was with the warden, who was required to visit every inmate every day, and the overseers, who were mandated to see each inmate 3 times a day, probably for food.
Yep.
But even this communication was made through a small portal where meals and work materials were passed. But just 2 years later, in 1831, it was already clear that the penitentiary would have to hold more criminals. Soon, second floors were added to all the wings. The same year, the first female prisoner was confined to the penitentiary. In 1832, the first inmate made his escape from the prison. For some reason, this inmate was not entirely confined to solitude and served as the warden's waiter. He made his escape by lowering himself from the roof of the front building. He was later captured and returned, but escaped in the same way in 1837.
I mean, if they're not going to fix it,
right?
Why not try it again?
By the time the original plan was completed in 1836, the building was the largest and most expensive public structure ever erected in the United States at the cost of $780,000, which today would be approximately $18 million. At the time, the cost was believed to have been the second only to the U.S. Capitol.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. The Pennsylvania system was opposed by the Auburn system, which known as the New York system, which held that prisoners should be forced to work together in silence and could be subject to physical punishment. The system was favored in the United States. Regardless of the cost and the disfavor by other systems, delegates from around the world came to study the radical floor plan and systems of solitary confinement, and it became the model for more than 300 prisons worldwide. Some were not so convinced of the method. Charles Dickens, after a visit in 1842, wrote critically, "I am persuaded that those who design this system do not know what it is they are doing. I hold the slow and daily tempering with the mysteries of the brain to be immensely worse than torture of the body." So it was mental torture.
Yeah, because if you can't talk to somebody,
no interaction.
You have no interaction, no fit. You don't see another person's face. You don't interact. That's like soul crushing.
Yes.
I mean, you have no relationship.
And I think as humans, we need that.
We absolutely
need that.
Like
Involvement,
physical, mental, and all. You need all that stimulus, right, to be able to do. That's like living in a void.
Yes,
basically.
Well, it gets better.
Oh, good.
By the 1870s, the prison needed more space, and 4 new cell blocks were added in 1877 between the existing wings. Before long, the individual exercise yards were eliminated and inmates exercised together, but they were still required to wear the masks and be silent. Though the reform plan of the Pennsylvania system called for no corporal punishment, this was not the case. Guard and counselors were known to have designated various physical and psychological torture regimens for various infractions. One of these, called the water bath, was subjected inmates to being doused with water outside during winter months and then hung on a wall until ice formed on their skin.
Holy shit.
Another torture, called the mad chair, in which the prisoners were bound tightly for days until their circulation was cut off. The iron gag involved tying an inmate's hands behind with the back, or tied behind the back, with chains strapped to an iron collar in the mouth, which caused the tongue to tear and bleed.
And it's like this little plate you'll see.
Yeah. There's a couple. There's a picture of the chair as well. There's also a picture of this. Under Block 14 was dug an underground cell that was called the Hole. Here, inmates would stay locked, sometimes for weeks, with no lights, no human interaction, and only bread and water to eat. Due to overcrowding, the Eastern State Penitentiary eliminated the Pennsylvania system of isolation and penitence in 1913. Afterwards, prisoners then shared cells, worked together, and even played in organized sports. By the 1920s, the prison housed some 2,000 prisoners, and more cells were built, including some below ground. The windowless cells then had nothing to do with penance and everything to do with punishment. By this time, every cell was called home to 2 or 3 prisoners.
Oh my gosh.
In 1923, all female prisoners were removed and sent to a new prison in Muncie. In 1923, Leo Callahan and 5 accomplices, armed with pistols, successfully used a ladder they built to scale the east wall after holding up a group of unmanned guards. Callahan's accomplices were eventually apprehended, including one that made it as far as Honolulu, Hawaii. However, Callahan was never recaptured. By this time, the prison was also housing violent criminals and those sentenced to be executed. In 1933, a riot occurred in the prison over insufficient recreational facilities, overcrowding, and idleness. During this event, inmates set fires to their cells and destroyed workshops. The very next year, another riot occurred, this time over low wages. The prisoners' short-circuit electrical outlets started fires and caused other disturbance. In April 1945, 12 men escaped through a 97-foot-long tunnel built by Clarence Clandestine. I'm not saying his last name. Clandestine. I can't say his name. Who worked as a prison plasterer. The men were quickly recaptured and returned to the prison. In 1959, a new cell block was opened to house violent criminals. The last cell block to be built was the only one with electric doors. Though the prison housed those on death row, no executions ever took place there. In 1961, an inmate named John Klasenberger tricked a guard into opening an inmate's cell, and he and other prisoners overpowered the guard to begin the largest riot in the prison's history. It took several hours for a large force of police, guards, and state troopers to reclaim the prison. The riot fueled discussion to close the Eastern State Penitentiary, which has since been renamed the State Correctional Institution at Philadelphia. In addition to overcrowding, the prison was badly deteriorating.
It's just falling apart, basically, at this point. Well, it's not 100
overcrowded.
Plus years.
Yeah.
Overcrowded and beat to shit.
In January 1970, the prison closed, and the inmates were sent to the State Correctional Institute at Grateford. After a riot at a prison in Holmesburg, the prison again housed some of those inmates. In 1971, it was officially closed forever.
Probably a good thing. What I was thinking is Clarence, he dug a 93-yard tunnel or 93-foot tunnel or whatever it was. It sounds like the Shawshank Redemption.
97-foot tunnel.
97-foot. It reminds me of like the Shawshank Redemption kind of thing, right? But he got it. He got it, and he got caught.
All of them got caught.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're like,
caught and taken back.
He was a plasterer. Couldn't he have made the plaster heads, the plaster Paris or whatever?
So that the hole was covered and they wouldn't know they went out?
Or made the head and put it in the
And we do have a picture
Yeah.
of the hole with the guard in front of it. Over the course of its 142 years, the penitentiary held some 75,000 inmates, including prohibition gangster Al Capone and notorious bank robber Willie Sutton. More than 100 inmates escaped during this time, but all were recaptured except for Leo Callahan.
Okay. He's the one dude that got away.
One dude. While the prison was operating, 2 guards and several inmates were murdered within the walls. Other prisoners committed suicide, and hundreds of others died from disease and old age. Named a historical national landmark in 1965, the prison sat abandoned after it was closed, during which time it was heavily vandalized and trees began to grow in the buildings. The city of Philadelphia purchased the property, intending to redevelop it. Proposals included demolishing the building to use the site as a criminal justice center, a mall, a luxury apartment complex. But in 1988, a task force successfully petitioned the city to stop pursuing development. In 1994, the Pennsylvania Prison Society opened the prison for historic tours.
And ghost hunts.
Right. Today, the Eastern State Penitentiary, kept in state of preserved ruin, continues to operate as a historic and as a museum and a historic site. It's opened year-round for tours, both day and night, and special events are held throughout the year. In addition to its long history, the penitentiary is said to be the most haunted prison in the United States. For years, it has been investigated by paranormal groups and has been featured in several television shows. Those investigators, staff, and visitors have reported dozens of paranormal activity and numerous sightings of ghost entities. One of the first stories told of ghostly activity.
Same
was,
thing,
yeah,
ghastly,
right?
ghostly.
Ghostly activity was by famed Chicago gangster Al Capone, who was housed in the prison for 8 months in 1929 to 1930. Though he had the nicest cell in the prison, which we have a picture of that, which also included a desk, a lamp, a painting, and a radio, he said he was haunted by the ghost of James Clark, who was one of the victims from the St. Valentine Day Massacre in Chicago. Allegedly, Capone screamed every night in fright, screaming at Jimmy to go away and leave him alone.
Interestingly, the Al Capone, we went to Alcatraz,
Yes.
you and I, and the Al Capone cell there was awesome.
Yeah.
He had a TV.
He got
had
special treatment
had a
everywhere he
phone,
go. Yeah.
He had it was
He
nice.
did. This one
For
was nice
today-
too,
for
for
those
this being out of
standards.
building of stone. So, in the 1940s, both prisoners and guard began to have several unusual experiences and unexplained sightings. Many of these events involved spooky shadows and unexplained noises. Today, many people have reported that Cell Block 12 is an area of high paranormal activity where cackling and whispers are heard and the apparition of a prisoner is seen. In Cell Block 6, shadowy figures are often seen sliding along the walls, and the sounds of whispers, screams, and laughter have been heard. In Cell Block 4, many have seen ghostly, anguished faces and hearing loud whispers. On one occasion, a locksmith working in the area who was removing an old lock from a cell door had a vivid experience. He described having felt as if he was overcome by a massive force and was unable to move or speak, while distorted forms swirled around the cell block, one of which appeared to beckon to him. Many people have reported seeing the silhouette of a guard in one of the watchtowers. On the 3rd floor, one cell block, numerous visitors say they've heard the sound of cell doors suddenly opening and then slamming shut. The catwalk is an area where many paranormal events have occurred. Here, a shadowy figure was caught on a video. People have felt extreme temperature fluctuations, and one visitor captured a male voice saying, "I'm lonely," on an EVP. Visitors and staff report disembodied screams, cries of pain, sadistic laughter, and whispers throughout the prison. Others have reported that the sound of cell door handles jiggling, furniture being dragged across the floor, large objects rolling on the office, and ghostly footsteps. Many have seen orbs, streaks, and lights appear, felt unseen people tapping them on the shoulder, and get overwhelmed sensations of being watched and generally having feelings of dread. There's also one other ghost. Let me see if I can find it. They had one other ghost that they do see on there.
While you're finding that,
yeah.
Could you imagine if they had torn this place down and put an apartment building on that?
Oh, it would have been
like
so haunted.
poltergeist
It would have been
kind of
so
thing,
haunted.
right?
So the last ghost that people have seen is called Pep the dog, and he's been reported to be seen and heard throughout the prison. Pep was given free reign and life to go wherever he wanted and pleased.
That's awesome.
And thus is spotted in many different locations.
See, you got to like a ghost dog.
Yes.
I mean,
if you have to have
all
a ghost,
dogs go to heaven.
If you have to have a ghost, let's make it be a dog.
He must have done something bad.
So that is my story.
It's awesome.
The,
made me think of
Eastern State Penitentiary.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. That was great.
It's great history. I mean, the ghost part was great, but it was kind of cool hearing about how penitentiaries came about and what the thought process
Yeah.
of rehabilitation was supposed to be.
Penitence. You're paying penitence,
And
and you're
knowing it was all
repenting
crap,
and reforming.
you know?
And they really just turn into torture.
Well, because you, as the person that has this idea, may have the best laid plans, but the people come in and they probably get angry with the convicts, or
Who comes up again with like the thing that you put in your mouth?
Yeah,
that,
ties behind your hands,
and those, and then you freeze somebody.
Yeah, so
nearly
basically,
to death.
you're almost causing like
Hypothermia.
or frostbite,
Yeah,
possibly. And
that's
Pennsylvania's
terrible.
cold.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh's cold.
I don't know.
I think though that we should go find this place and do one of the night tours.
It's in Pennsylvania. We could probably just Google it. It's probably right there. We'll find it. But the other thing, just real quick, is it was made for what, 200 originally, and then there was 2,000 people in there.
Yeah.
So you think like a
Well, they kept having to build it and build it, and I do have some pictures. Like they have where it was just a single level, and it's just a single row of cells, which was how it was initially built. And then they started building. They like took the roof off and built and put the roof back on. So it's
crazy.
And it's kind of cool. The pictures now are cool. I'm sure it wasn't cool when you were a prisoner.
It looks like an old school.
But it's kind of cool. I like how they're like it's left in prehistoric
it's in ruins, historic ruins.
Yeah, which I was like, I do think though it could have been cool to make it a hotel with like a paranormal thing, like you're gonna come in. This place is wicked haunted, right? Wouldn't that be cool? Come stay the night if you dare. You're not getting your money back if you leave in the middle of the night, kind of place.
Nobody's going to bed, so basically just make it a.
I would go too.
You go to bed, Pete?
No, I would go and
haunt
all night.
No, you go because you'd want to be up all night and you'd have people.
At some point you have to fall asleep, but yeah.
Sleep in the morning.
I think so. I found this.
Maybe you day sleep at a place like this.
I feel like no matter what time it is of day, if the ghost is there, he doesn't give a crap what time it is.
That's true.
So that's
awesome.
My story today.
Thank you so much, Eastern State Penitentiary. Go check it out if you can find it. You can Google it. You can do all those things.
Yes. It's really
also,
cool.
go check us out on iTunes, Spotify. Like I said, give us a little thumbs up if you don't mind.
Sharing is caring.
We'll catch you next time. Cheers.
Bye, guys. Love you.
See ya.